Maya Patel wiped down the marble countertops in the executive kitchen of Meridian Financial Tower for the third time that morning. The gleaming surface reflected her tired face back at her, dark circles under her eyes telling the story of another sleepless night. At 26, she had been cleaning offices in downtown Chicago for 8 years, following in her mother's footsteps after Kamala Patel had worked these same buildings for nearly 2 decades. The early morning silence of the 42nd floor was broken only by the hum of computers and the distant rumble of traffic far below. Maya preferred these quiet hours before the executives arrived, when she could work in peace without the uncomfortable stares and dismissive glances that followed her throughout the day. Most people saw only what they expected to see, a young black woman pushing a cleaning cart, invisible and unimportant. What they didn't know was that Maya held a master's degree in forensic accounting from Northwestern University, a credential she had earned through night classes and weekend study sessions while working full-time to support her younger brother through college. They also didn't know that she spoke 5 languages fluently, including Hindi, which she had learned from her Indian stepfather after her mother remarried when Maya was 12. Maya's cleaning route took her through the offices of Meridian Financial's top executives every morning. She had developed an efficient system over the years, moving methodically from office to office, emptying trash bins, dusting surfaces, and restocking supplies. The executives rarely acknowledged her presence, treating her as part of the furniture. This invisibility, which had once stung, had become her greatest asset. As she entered the corner office of David Blackstone, Meridian Financial's chief financial officer, Maya noticed something unusual. The normally pristine desk was cluttered with papers, and Blackstone's computer monitor was still glowing, displaying what appeared to be financial spreadsheets. She had never seen him leave his office in such disarray. Maya began her usual routine, carefully working around the scattered documents. As she dusted the desk, her trained eye caught glimpses of the financial data on the screen. Years of studying forensic accounting had taught her to recognize patterns and anomalies in financial statements, and something about these numbers didn't look right. The spreadsheet showed quarterly revenue figures for Meridian's international division, with particular focus on their operations in Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. Maya's fluency in Hindi allowed her to understand the column headers and notations that were partially written in Devanagari script. Most people would have assumed these were legitimate business records, but Maya's expertise revealed several red flags. Revenue figures showed impossibly consistent growth patterns that defied normal market fluctuations. Transaction codes were formatted in ways that didn't match standard international banking protocols. Most suspicious of all, several entries contained mathematical errors that would have been caught by any competent accounting system, unless someone was deliberately bypassing normal audit procedures. Maya quickly memorized key details from the spreadsheet before continuing her cleaning. She had learned long ago to work efficiently while processing information, a skill that had served her well during her years of balancing education with employment. As she moved to empty the trash bin beside Blackstone's desk, she noticed crumpled papers that contained handwritten notes in both English and Hindi. The handwritten notes appeared to be calculations related to currency exchanges and fund transfers. Maya recognized references to shell companies and offshore accounts, terminology that immediately raised alarms given her background in forensic accounting. The Hindi portions of the notes contained what appeared to be instructions for manipulating transaction records to avoid detection by regulatory authorities. One particular note caught her attention. Written in Hindi, it contained explicit instructions for creating false documentation to support fictitious revenue claims. The note referenced Project Suya, which appeared to be a code name for a large-scale financial operation involving multiple international subsidiaries. The handwriting was hurried and contained several crossed-out sections, suggesting these were working notes rather than formal documentation. Maya realized she was looking at evidence of what could be massive financial fraud. Her forensic accounting training had covered numerous case studies of corporate fraud schemes, and the patterns she was seeing matched textbook examples of revenue manipulation and money laundering operations. The use of multiple languages and complex international transactions was clearly designed to confuse auditors and regulatory oversight. After completing her cleaning duties in Blackstone's office, Maya moved on to her next stops, but her mind remained focused on what she had discovered. She continued her rounds through the offices of other senior executives, paying closer attention to any documents or computer screens that might provide additional context for what she had seen. In the office of Sarah Chen, Meridian's chief operating officer, Maya found additional pieces of the puzzle. Chen's computer displayed email correspondence with various international partners, including several companies based in India and the Cayman Islands. The email chains discussed operational adjustments and reporting modifications, using language that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify business activities. Maya's cleaning cart contained a small notebook where she recorded supply needs and maintenance issues for each office. As she worked through the morning, she began discreetly noting key details about what she was observing. She used a personal shorthand system she had developed during her university studies, recording information in a way that would appear meaningless to anyone who might accidentally see her notes. By the time Maya completed her morning rounds, she had compiled a substantial amount of concerning information. The evidence pointed to a sophisticated fraud scheme involving inflated revenue reports, fictitious international transactions, and deliberate manipulation of accounting records. The scheme appeared to involve multiple executives within Meridian Financial and extended to several international subsidiaries and partner companies. Maya understood the gravity of what she had discovered. Meridian Financial was a publicly traded company with thousands of investors and employees. If her suspicions were correct, the fraud scheme could involve hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. The impact on innocent investors and employees would be devastating if the scheme eventually collapsed. However, Maya also understood her precarious position. As a cleaning employee with no official standing within the company, her claims would likely be dismissed or ignored. Worse, if the executives involved in the fraud learned that she had discovered their activities, her safety could be at risk. She had heard stories of whistleblowers facing retaliation, harassment, and even physical threats. 3 weeks after her initial discovery, Maya Patel had developed a sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation disguised as routine cleaning duties. She had mapped the daily schedules of 12 senior executives, identified the security camera blind spots on the 42nd floor, and established a secure method for storing and organizing the evidence she was collecting. Maya's small studio apartment had been transformed into an amateur investigation headquarters. She had converted her dining table into a workspace where she spread out photocopied documents, printed emails, and handwritten notes transcribed from her observations. A large wall map showed the international network of companies and banks involved in what she now understood to be a complex money laundering operation spanning 3 continents. The fraud scheme was more sophisticated than Maya had initially realized. Meridian Financial had created a web of subsidiary companies in India, each with legitimate business licenses and professional-looking websites. These companies existed primarily on paper, with minimal actual operations but extensive financial records showing millions of dollars in revenue and expenses. The key to the scheme was a software system called Gandhi Protocol, which Maya discovered referenced in several internal emails. The system allowed Meridian's executives to create false transaction records that would pass initial auditing reviews. The name was clearly chosen as a cultural reference that most American auditors would overlook, assuming it was simply an Indian business practice they didn't understand. Maya's understanding of Hindi culture and language allowed her to decode references that would have been meaningless to other investigators. When executives wrote about Diwali bonuses in their correspondence, they were actually referring to quarterly payments to offshore accounts. References to Mumbai monsoons indicated delays in moving money through particular banking channels. The cultural camouflage was clever and would have been nearly impossible to crack without insider knowledge of both Indian culture and forensic accounting. Dr. James Morrison, Meridian's chief executive officer, emerged as the apparent mastermind of the operation. Maya had initially dismissed him as a typical corporate figurehead, but careful observation revealed him to be deeply involved in the day-to-day management of the fraud scheme. Morrison spoke fluent Hindi, which he had apparently learned during a decade working in India early in his career. He used this skill to communicate directly with Indian partners without relying on translators who might become suspicious. Maya's most significant breakthrough came when she discovered Morrison's private safe behind a painting in his office. The safe had been left open after a late-night meeting, revealing USB drives, international banking documents, and handwritten ledgers tracking the real financial flows within the fraud network. Maya had only minutes to photograph the contents before Morrison returned, but those images provided the missing pieces of the puzzle. The ledgers revealed the true scope of the operation. Over 18 months, Meridian Financial had reported $1.2 billion in fictitious revenue from their Indian subsidiaries. The actual amount stolen was approximately $847 million, with the remainder representing false accounting entries designed to balance the books and avoid detection. The money had been systematically moved through a network of shell companies before ending up in personal accounts controlled by Morrison and his inner circle. Maya discovered that her own employment had an unexpected connection to the fraud scheme. The cleaning service that employed her was actually owned by one of Meridian's shell companies, providing another layer of financial manipulation while ensuring that cleaning staff could be easily controlled or eliminated if they became inconvenient. Maya realized that her position put her in significant personal danger if her investigation was discovered. The human cost of the fraud began to crystallize as Maya researched Meridian's investors and employees. The company's pension fund had been used as collateral for loans that financed the fraudulent operations, putting the retirement savings of thousands of employees at risk. Several major university endowments had invested heavily in Meridian stock based on the false revenue reports, potentially affecting scholarship programs and educational opportunities for future generations. Maya also discovered that the fraud had international victims. The fake Indian subsidiaries had entered into legitimate business contracts with real companies, taking payments for services that were never delivered. Small businesses in Mumbai and Delhi had lost millions of dollars when Meridian's shell companies disappeared with their money. The fraud was destroying lives on multiple continents, making it clear that Maya's investigation had implications far beyond American financial markets. As Maya gathered more evidence, she realized she needed help from someone with legal expertise and political connections. However, identifying trustworthy allies proved challenging. Several attorneys who specialized in financial fraud were found to have existing relationships with Meridian Financial. Maya discovered that Morrison had been systematically cultivating relationships with potential threats, including prosecutors, regulators, and journalists who might investigate the company. Maya's breakthrough came when she remembered Professor Elena Rodriguez, who had taught her advanced forensic accounting course at Northwestern University. Professor Rodriguez had spent 15 years as an FBI financial crimes investigator before entering academia, and she had maintained connections within federal law enforcement agencies. Maya decided to reach out to her former professor, hoping to find someone who could guide her through the complex legal and political challenges ahead. The meeting with Professor Rodriguez took place at a small coffee shop near Northwestern's campus. Maya had prepared a comprehensive presentation of her findings, organizing the evidence into clear categories that demonstrated both the mechanics of the fraud and its impact on victims. She had also prepared detailed documentation of her own role as a whistleblower, including her qualifications as a forensic accountant and her unique access to the evidence. Professor Rodriguez was initially skeptical, questioning how a cleaning employee could have gathered such detailed financial information. However, as Maya explained her background and demonstrated her understanding of the fraud mechanics, the professor became increasingly interested. The combination of Maya's academic credentials, her linguistic abilities, and her access to internal documents created a unique opportunity to expose a massive financial crime. Professor Rodriguez explained the challenges Maya would face as a whistleblower. Corporate fraud cases were notoriously difficult to prosecute, requiring extensive evidence and testimony that could withstand aggressive legal challenges. Maya would need to be prepared for personal attacks on her credibility, background, and motivations. The defendants would likely argue that she had misunderstood legitimate business practices or that she had fabricated evidence for personal gain. However, Professor Rodriguez also recognized the strength of Maya's case. The photographic evidence, combined with Maya's expert analysis and cultural insights, provided a compelling foundation for prosecution. The international nature of the fraud would require cooperation between multiple agencies, but it also meant that the case would receive significant attention from media and political leaders. Professor Rodriguez agreed to help Maya navigate the whistleblower process, beginning with a formal complaint to the Securities and Exchange Commission. She also recommended that Maya contact the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and consider reaching out to investigative journalists who specialized in corporate fraud. The goal was to build a coalition of investigators and prosecutors who could pursue the case from multiple angles while protecting Maya from retaliation. Maya's transformation from invisible cleaning employee to star witness in a major fraud investigation would require careful planning and significant personal courage. She would need to continue her cleaning duties while secretly cooperating with federal investigators, maintaining her cover until prosecutors were ready to move forward with charges. The process could take months or even years, during which Maya would be living a dangerous double life. Professor Rodriguez warned Maya about the personal cost. FBI Special Agent Marcus Williams had seen hundreds of financial fraud cases during his 12-year career with the Bureau's Chicago office, but the evidence package delivered by Professor Elena Rodriguez represented something extraordinary. The case file Maya Patel had assembled contained photographic documentation, financial analysis, and cultural insights that painted a picture of sophisticated international fraud operating under the noses of multiple regulatory agencies. Agent Williams studied the evidence Maya had gathered over the past 6 weeks. The photographs of internal documents were clear and detailed, showing transaction records, banking information, and handwritten notes that revealed the inner workings of the fraud scheme. Maya's forensic accounting analysis demonstrated a deep understanding of financial crime techniques and provided clear explanations of how the fraud operated across international boundaries. What impressed Agent Williams most was Maya's ability to decode the cultural camouflage that had protected the fraud scheme from detection. The use of Hindi language and Indian cultural references had created an effective barrier against investigation by American law enforcement and regulatory agencies. Most investigators would have dismissed these elements as legitimate international business practices, but Maya's linguistic and cultural expertise had revealed their true purpose as criminal communication tools. The first formal meeting between Maya and Agent Williams took place in a secure conference room at the FBI's Chicago field office. Maya had taken a sick day from her cleaning job, telling her supervisor she had food poisoning and would need several days to recover. She arrived at the FBI building carrying a large briefcase containing organized copies of all the evidence she had collected. Agent Williams was struck by Maya's professionalism and expertise during their initial interview. Despite her cleaning job and humble circumstances, she spoke with the authority of a trained forensic accountant and demonstrated intimate knowledge of international banking regulations and corporate fraud techniques. Her presentation of the evidence was clear, logical, and compelling, addressing potential weaknesses in the case before they were raised. Maya explained how her unique position had allowed her to gather evidence that would have been impossible for traditional investigators to obtain. Her invisibility as a cleaning employee had provided unrestricted access to executive offices, while her linguistic abilities and forensic accounting training had enabled her to understand the significance of what she was seeing. She had essentially conducted an 18-month undercover investigation without anyone realizing she was qualified to understand what she was observing. The challenge for Agent Williams was determining how to proceed with the investigation while protecting Maya's safety and maintaining her access to evidence. If Meridian's executives discovered that their cleaning lady was actually a trained forensic accountant working with federal investigators, Maya could face serious personal danger and the investigation could be compromised. The solution was to develop a covert operation that would allow Maya to continue her cleaning duties while secretly gathering additional evidence for prosecutors. Agent Williams arranged for Maya to receive specialized training in evidence collection, surveillance techniques, and personal safety protocols. FBI technicians provided her with miniaturized recording devices disguised as cleaning supplies, allowing her to capture conversations and photograph documents without detection. Maya learned to communicate with federal investigators through encrypted messaging systems and dead-drop locations that would not compromise her cover. The expanded investigation revealed that Meridian Financial's fraud scheme was even larger than Maya had initially discovered. Additional shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore were identified through banking records obtained by international law enforcement cooperation. The total amount of stolen funds appeared to exceed $1.5 billion when all international transactions were included in the analysis. Maya's continuing access to executive offices provided real-time intelligence about the fraud operation. She discovered that Morrison and his associates were planning to accelerate their timeline for moving money out of easily traced accounts. Internal emails discussed exit strategies and golden parachute protocols that suggested the executives were preparing to flee the country before their crimes were discovered. The pressure of living a double life began to take a significant toll on Maya's mental and physical health. She was working her regular cleaning shifts while conducting covert intelligence operations, meeting with federal investigators, and analyzing financial documents late into the night. The stress of maintaining her cover while knowing that thousands of people were being harmed by the ongoing fraud created constant anxiety and sleepless nights. Maya's family relationships became strained as she struggled to explain her frequent absences and distracted behavior. Her mother Kamala noticed that Maya seemed tired and worried but couldn't understand why her daughter wouldn't discuss what was bothering her. Maya's younger brother David, who was completing his final semester of college, began to worry that his sister was experiencing depression or other mental health issues. The investigation reached a critical juncture when Maya discovered that Meridian Financial was planning a major stock offering that would defraud additional investors. The company intended to raise $500 million through the sale of new shares, using falsified financial statements to inflate the stock price. Maya realized that federal prosecutors needed to act quickly to prevent even more victims from being harmed. Agent Williams coordinated with prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois to develop an arrest and prosecution strategy. The case required careful timing to maximize the evidence collected while minimizing the risk to Maya and other potential witnesses. Simultaneous raids would be conducted at Meridian's offices, the homes of key executives, and international locations where evidence was believed to be stored. Maya's role in the final phase of the investigation was crucial but dangerous. She would need to maintain her cleaning schedule right up until the moment of the arrests, providing real-time intelligence about the executives' movements and activities. FBI agents would be positioned nearby to provide protection, but Maya would essentially be working alone in a building full of people who might kill her if they discovered her true identity. The tension escalated when Maya overheard a conversation between Morrison and Blackstone discussing their suspicions about possible surveillance. They had noticed unusual patterns in document handling and suspected that someone within the company might be gathering evidence against them. Morrison instructed his security team to conduct background checks on all cleaning staff and maintenance workers, putting Maya at immediate risk of discovery. Maya's Northwestern University records would eventually reveal her forensic accounting credentials if Morrison's security team conducted a thorough investigation. Agent Williams and his team developed an emergency extraction plan in case Maya's cover was blown before the arrests could be executed. Maya was provided with a panic button that would summon immediate FBI response and instructions for emergency evacuation procedures. The emotional strain of the investigation intensified when Maya learned that her own family's financial security was threatened by the fraud scheme. Her brother David's college fund was invested through a retirement plan that held significant amounts of Meridian stock. If the company collapsed when the fraud was exposed, David might not be able to complete his education. Maya realized that her investigation was not just about protecting strangers, it was about saving her own family's future. Maya's mother Kamala had arrests began at dawn on a Tuesday morning in March, with coordinated raids across 12 locations in 4 countries. Maya Patel was already in Meridian Financial Tower, conducting what would be her final cleaning shift in the executive offices. FBI agents positioned throughout the building waited for her signal that all targets were in their usual locations before beginning the operation that would dismantle one of the largest financial fraud schemes in American history. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she entered the trash bin in Morrison's office at 6:47 a.m., knowing that federal agents were surrounding the building and preparing to arrest everyone she had been observing for the past 8 months. Morrison sat at his desk, speaking quietly in Hindi on his cell phone, apparently coordinating final money transfers to accounts in Switzerland. Maya activated the recording device hidden in her cleaning cart, capturing what would prove to be crucial evidence of Morrison's continued criminal activity. At exactly 7 a.m., FBI agents stormed through the main entrance of Meridian Financial Tower while additional teams moved simultaneously through service entrances and emergency stairwells. Maya heard the commotion from the executive floor and watched through Morrison's window as dozens of federal vehicles surrounded the building. Morrison looked up from his phone call, his face reflecting sudden understanding that his criminal empire was collapsing around him. Maya continued her cleaning duties as planned, maintaining her cover while federal agents swept through the building. She watched Morrison attempt to destroy documents and electronic devices, but he was interrupted by agents who burst into his office with weapons drawn and arrest warrants ready. Maya stepped back against the wall, playing her role as a frightened cleaning lady while secretly feeling enormous relief that her dangerous undercover operation was finally over. David Morrison, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and violation of federal securities laws, Agent Williams announced as Morrison was handcuffed and read his Miranda rights. Morrison's eyes scanned the room desperately, looking for escape routes or evidence he might have missed destroying. His gaze passed over Maya without recognition, still seeing only an invisible service worker rather than the forensic accountant who had exposed his crimes. Blackstone was arrested in his home in Highland Park, where FBI agents discovered a safe containing $2.3 million in cash, foreign passports, and detailed instructions for accessing offshore bank accounts. Sarah Chen was taken into custody at O'Hare Airport, where she was attempting to board a flight to Singapore with luggage containing encrypted hard drives and bearer bonds worth millions of dollars. The coordinated arrests prevented the conspirators from escaping or destroying additional evidence. Maya's transformation from undercover witness to public whistleblower began immediately after the arrests. Agent Williams escorted her to a secure location where she was debriefed by federal prosecutors and prepared for the media attention that would follow the announcement of the charges. Maya changed from her cleaning uniform into professional attire, symbolically completing her transition from invisible worker to star witness. The press conference announcing the arrests drew national media attention, with reporters eager to understand how such a sophisticated fraud scheme had been detected and exposed. U.S. Attorney Jennifer Hassan praised the investigation as an example of excellent cooperation between law enforcement agencies and courageous whistleblowers who risk personal safety to protect innocent victims. When Maya was introduced as the key witness whose investigation had exposed the fraud, the media reaction was immediate and intense. Reporters struggled to understand how a cleaning employee had uncovered evidence that had eluded professional auditors, regulatory investigators, and financial analysts. Maya's combination of advanced education, linguistic abilities, and unique access created a story that captured public imagination and challenged assumptions about intelligence, class, and social visibility. Maya's first public statement was carefully prepared with assistance from federal prosecutors and Professor Rodriguez. She explained how her forensic accounting education had enabled her to recognize suspicious patterns in financial documents, while her fluency in Hindi had allowed her to understand communications that were designed to avoid detection by American investigators. She emphasized that fraud prevention required diverse perspectives and that criminals often exploited cultural and linguistic barriers to hide their activities. The public response to Maya's story was overwhelmingly positive, with social media campaigns celebrating her courage and expertise. #Maya Patel and #Hindi Hero became trending topics as people shared stories about the importance of education, linguistic diversity, and recognizing intelligence in unexpected places. Maya received thousands of messages from supporters around the world, including many from other immigrants who had faced similar challenges in having their skills and knowledge recognized. However, Maya also faced significant backlash from Meridian Financial supporters and from people who questioned her motives and credibility. Defense attorneys began spreading rumors that Maya had fabricated evidence or that she was working with competitors to damage Meridian's reputation. Anonymous online critics attacked her race, her family background, and her employment history, attempting to undermine her credibility before the trial began. Maya's family struggled to adjust to the sudden media attention and public scrutiny. Kamala Patel was proud of her daughter's courage but worried about the personal risks Maya was facing as a high-profile witness in a case involving billions of dollars and powerful criminals. David Patel found himself defending his sister's reputation on social media and dealing with reporters who wanted to interview Maya's family members. The legal proceedings moved quickly as federal prosecutors built their case around Maya's evidence and testimony. Grand juries in Chicago and New York returned indictments charging Morrison, Blackstone, Chen, and 17 other defendants with multiple felony counts carrying potential sentences of decades in prison. The evidence Maya had collected provided the foundation for charges that included conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Maya's preparation for trial testimony required extensive work with prosecutors to organize her evidence and refine her presentation for jury audiences. She learned to explain complex forensic accounting concepts in simple language that ordinary citizens could understand, while maintaining the technical precision necessary to prove the criminal charges. Maya's bilingual abilities became crucial for explaining how the defendants had used Hindi communications to coordinate their criminal activities. The defense strategy became clear as Morrison's legal team hired investigators to examine every aspect of Maya's background, education, and employment history. They attempted to portray her as an unreliable witness with financial motives for falsely accusing respected business leaders. Defense attorneys questioned how someone working as a cleaning lady could possess the expertise to understand sophisticated financial transactions, implying that Maya's testimony was coached or fabricated by federal prosecutors. Maya's credibility was further challenged when defense investigators discovered that she had not disclosed her forensic accounting credentials when she was hired by the cleaning service. Defense attorneys argued that Maya had deliberately concealed her qualifications to gain access to confidential information, making her investigation a form of corporate espionage rather than legitimate whistleblowing. They demanded that all evidence collected by Maya be excluded from the trial on grounds of illegal surveillance. Federal prosecutors successfully argued that Maya's investigation was legal because she was reporting criminal activity and because she had observed the evidence while performing legitimate duties as a cleaning employee. Judge Patricia Morrison ruled that Maya's education and qualifications made her more credible as a witness, not less, and that her failure to disclose her credentials to her employer was irrelevant to the criminal charges against the defendants. The trial of United States v. Morrison began on a crisp October morning in the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago. Maya Patel sat in the witness waiting room, wearing a navy blue business suit that had been selected by image consultants to project professionalism and credibility. After 18 months of living as an invisible cleaning lady, Maya was about to take the witness stand as the star witness in one of the largest financial fraud trials in American history. Judge Patricia Morrison presided over a packed courtroom filled with reporters, fraud victims, legal observers, and family members of both witnesses and defendants. The prosecution team, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Hassan, had spent months organizing Maya's evidence into a compelling narrative that would demonstrate the scope and sophistication of the fraud scheme. The defense team, consisting of 12 attorneys representing Morrison and his co-conspirators, had prepared an aggressive strategy to attack Maya's credibility and minimize the significance of her testimony. Maya's testimony began with her educational background and professional qualifications, establishing her expertise in forensic accounting and international financial crime detection. She explained how her master's degree from Northwestern University had prepared her to recognize suspicious patterns in financial statements and how her fluency in Hindi had enabled her to understand communications that were designed to avoid detection by American investigators. Ms. Patel, Assistant U.S. Attorney Hassan asked, "Please tell the jury how you first discovered evidence of fraudulent activity at Meridian Financial Corporation." Maya's voice was clear and confident as she described finding the suspicious spreadsheets in Morrison's office during her routine cleaning duties. She explained how her forensic accounting training had enabled her to identify mathematical anomalies and formatting irregularities that indicated deliberate manipulation of financial records. The jury listened intently as Maya described the painstaking process of documenting evidence while maintaining her cover as an invisible service worker. Maya's testimony included detailed explanations of how the defendants had used Hindi language and Indian cultural references to disguise criminal communications. She translated specific phrases from intercepted emails and phone conversations, showing how Morrison and his associates had coordinated money laundering operations through coded language that would have been meaningless to investigators without cultural and linguistic expertise. The defendants referred to quarterly payments to offshore accounts as Diwali bonuses, Maya explained to the jury. Diwali is the Hindu festival of lights, celebrated with gift-giving and financial transactions. To most American investigators, this would appear to be a legitimate cultural business practice. However, the context and timing of these references made it clear that they were actually coordinating criminal money transfers. Meyer's photographic evidence was presented to the jury through a sophisticated multimedia presentation that demonstrated the flow of stolen funds through multiple international accounts. Meyer had organized the evidence chronologically, showing how the fraud scheme had evolved from simple revenue manipulation to complex international money laundering involving dozens of shell companies and offshore banking relationships. The most dramatic moment of Meyer's testimony came when she described discovering Morrison's private ledger containing handwritten records of the actual financial flows within the fraud network. Meyer had risked her safety to photograph these documents when Morrison's office safe was accidentally left open, providing prosecutors with the smoking gun evidence needed to prove the defendant's criminal intent. Defense attorney Robert Steinberg began his cross-examination of Meyer with an aggressive attack on her motives and credibility. He suggested that Meyer had fabricated evidence to gain fame and financial reward, questioning why a highly educated forensic accountant would work as a cleaning lady unless she had ulterior motives for gaining access to confidential information. Ms. Patel, isn't it true that you deliberately concealed your qualifications when you applied for employment with the cleaning service? Steinberg demanded. Meyer remained calm under the aggressive questioning, explaining that she had taken the cleaning job to support her family while searching for opportunities in her field of expertise. She testified that forensic accounting positions were highly competitive and that many employers had overlooked her qualifications due to racial and cultural biases. Meyer's honest acknowledgement of these challenges actually strengthened her credibility with the jury, who could understand the economic pressures that had led her to accept work below her qualifications. Steinberg attempted to discredit Meyer's linguistic abilities, suggesting that she had misinterpreted innocent business communications as evidence of criminal activity. He brought in his own Hindi language expert who testified that many of the phrases Meyer had translated could have legitimate business meanings. However, Meyer's cross-examination of the defense expert revealed that he had no experience with financial crime terminology and had never worked as a forensic accountant. Mr. Gupta, Meyer said during her redirect examination, you testified that the phrase Mumbai monsoons could refer to actual weather conditions affecting business operations. However, these communications occurred in December and January, when Mumbai experiences its dry season with minimal rainfall. Furthermore, the context of these communications clearly linked the phrase to banking delays and fund transfer problems, not meteorological conditions. Meyer's expertise and preparation shone through as she systematically demolished the defense challenges to her testimony. She had anticipated every potential line of attack and had prepared detailed responses that demonstrated both her technical knowledge and her understanding of the cultural context surrounding the fraud scheme. The prosecution's presentation of Meyer's evidence took 4 full days, with Meyer on the witness stand for more than 20 hours of testimony and cross-examination. Her performance exceeded everyone's expectations, as she remained composed under intense pressure while clearly explaining complex financial concepts to the jury. Meyer's combination of technical expertise, linguistic abilities, and moral courage made her an extraordinarily compelling witness. The defense case collapsed when Morrison himself took the witness stand and attempted to deny his involvement in the fraud scheme. Under cross-examination by Assistant U.S. Attorney Hassan, Morrison was confronted with his own handwritten notes in Hindi that Meyer had translated and explained to the jury. Morrison's inability to provide credible explanations for these documents severely damaged his credibility and confirmed the accuracy of Meyer's interpretations. After 6 weeks of testimony and evidence presentation, the case went to the jury for deliberation. Meyer watched from the gallery as 12 ordinary citizens considered evidence she had risked her life to collect. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning guilty verdicts on all major charges against Morrison, Blackstone, Chen, and 14 other defendants. Judge Morrison sentenced Morrison to 27 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay $1.2 billion in restitution to fraud victims. Blackstone received 22 years, while Chen was sentenced to 18 years for her role in the conspiracy. The sentences were among the longest ever imposed for financial fraud, reflecting the massive scope of the crimes and the harm caused to thousands of victims. Meyer's courage and expertise were formally recognized when she received the FBI Director's Award for Public Service, the highest civilian honor given by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She also received the Whistleblower of the Year award from several advocacy organizations and was invited to speak at conferences and universities about fraud prevention and the importance of cultural diversity in law enforcement. The financial recovery process took 2 years, but prosecutors were ultimately able to recover $1.1 billion of the stolen funds for distribution to fraud victims. Maya's evidence had enabled authorities to trace money flows through multiple international jurisdictions and freeze assets before they could be permanently hidden. Thousands of investors, pensioners, and small businesses received compensation for their losses, validating Maya's decision to risk her safety to expose the fraud. Maya's personal transformation was as dramatic as her professional recognition. She was hired as a senior forensic accountant by the FBI's Chicago field office, where she specialized in investigating international financial crimes involving cultural and linguistic barriers. Maya's unique combination of skills made her an invaluable asset for cases involving fraud schemes that exploited cultural stereotypes and communication challenges. Professor Rodriguez established the Maya Patel Fellowship at Northwestern University, providing scholarships for students from underrepresented communities who wanted to pursue careers in forensic accounting and financial crime investigation. The fellowship program emphasized the importance of diverse perspectives in detecting and preventing sophisticated fraud schemes. Maya's family relationships were strengthened by her success, as her mother Kamala finally understood why her highly educated daughter had continued working as a cleaning lady. David Patel completed his college degree with financial assistance from Maya's whistleblower reward money and went on to law school with plans to become a civil rights attorney. The Patel family became advocates for educational opportunity and immigrant rights, using their platform to support other families facing similar challenges. The Meridian Financial case became a landmark in corporate fraud prosecution, establishing new precedents for international cooperation in financial crime investigation and demonstrating the importance of linguistic and cultural expertise in detecting sophisticated fraud schemes. Law enforcement agencies around the world studied Maya's investigation techniques and developed new training programs to help investigators recognize and interpret cultural camouflage in financial crimes. Maya's story inspired a best-selling book, a documentary film, and numerous academic studies about the intersection of immigration, education, and criminal justice. Her transformation from invisible worker to internationally recognized expert challenged stereotypes about intelligence, class, and social visibility while demonstrating the power of education and moral courage to overcome systemic prejudice. 5 years after the trial, Maya was promoted to supervise the FBI's International Financial Crimes Unit, leading a team of investigators who specialized in complex fraud schemes involving multiple countries and cultures. She had built a career protecting innocent victims from sophisticated financial criminals, using the same skills and principles that had enabled her to expose the Meridian financial fraud. Maya often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had transformed her from an overlooked cleaning lady into one of America's most respected financial crime investigators. Her success had required enormous personal sacrifice and courage, but it had also proven that intelligence, education, and moral principles could triumph over wealth, privilege, and criminal sophistication. The cleaning lady who spoke Hindi had become a powerful symbol of justice and redemption, demonstrating that the most important battles against corruption and fraud could be won by ordinary people with extraordinary determination to do what was right. Maya Patel had transformed not only her own life but also the lives of thousands of fraud victims who had received justice because one courageous woman refused to remain invisible in the face of massive financial crimes. The international scope of the fraud scheme created additional complexities for the prosecution. Swiss banking authorities froze accounts containing $847 million in stolen funds, but recovery of the money required cooperation with multiple foreign governments and complex legal proceedings that could take years to complete. Victims of the fraud organized class action lawsuits seeking compensation for their losses, with Maya's evidence forming the basis for civil as well as criminal proceedings. Maya's personal security became a serious concern as the trial approached. Federal marshals provided protection after investigators discovered that Morrison's associates were attempting to locate Maya's home address and family information. Maya was relocated to a secure apartment and provided with 24-hour protection, dramatically changing her daily life and limiting her contact with friends and family. The psychological stress of testifying against powerful defendants while living under constant security protection took a significant toll on Maya's mental health. She worked with FBI counselors and victim advocates to develop coping strategies for dealing with aggressive cross-examination, media attention, and ongoing security threats. Maya's transformation from invisible worker to public figure had come at enormous personal cost. Professor Rodriguez continued to serve as Maya's mentor and advocate, helping her navigate the complex legal and media landscape while maintaining focus on the importance of her testimony for protecting fraud victims. Professor Rodriguez also worked with academic and professional organizations to ensure that Maya would have career opportunities after the trial, recognizing that her whistleblowing activities might make it difficult for her to find traditional employment in the financial industry. As the trial date approached, Maya reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had transformed her from an overlooked cleaning lady into the star witness in one of the largest financial fraud prosecutions in American history. She had risked everything to expose crimes that were harming thousands of innocent people, and she had proven that intelligence, education, and moral courage could overcome prejudice, privilege, and power. Maya understood that her testimony would determine the outcome of the trial and the fate of the defendants who had stolen billions of dollars from investors, employees, and international business partners. The young woman who had once been invisible was about to take center stage in a courtroom drama that would test every skill she had developed and every principle she believed in. The cleaning lady who spoke Hindi was ready to bring justice to those who thought they were beyond the reach of the law. I've always been proud of her daughter's educational achievements, but she had never understood why Maya continued working as a cleaning lady after earning her master's degree. The investigation finally provided an answer to that question, though Maya couldn't share the truth until the case was resolved. Maya realized that her mother's years of sacrifice and hard work had prepared both of them for this moment of testing their principles and courage. Professor Rodriguez continued to serve as Maya's mentor and emotional support throughout the investigation. She helped Maya understand the broader implications of the case and prepared her for the media attention and legal challenges that would follow the arrests. Professor Rodriguez also worked with feminist and civil rights organizations to ensure that Maya's story would be told accurately and that she would receive proper recognition for her courage and expertise. The investigation attracted attention from international law enforcement agencies as evidence emerged of fraud victims in multiple countries. Interpol coordinated with FBI investigators to track money flows through European banks and identify additional shell companies operating in various jurisdictions. Maya's evidence had triggered the largest international financial fraud investigation in recent history. As the arrest date approached, Maya reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from invisible cleaning lady to star witness in a billion-dollar fraud case. She had risked her safety, her family's security, and her future career to expose crimes that most people would never have been able to detect. The girl who had been rendered invisible by prejudice and social assumptions was about to become the most important witness in American financial crime prosecution. Maya understood that the arrests would only be the beginning of a long legal battle. Morrison and his associates would hire the best attorneys money could buy, and they would attack every aspect of Maya's credibility and background. She would need to testify in multiple trials, face aggressive cross-examination, and live with the constant threat of retaliation from powerful criminals who had lost everything because of her investigation. Despite these challenges, Maya felt a growing sense of pride and purpose. She had used her education, her cultural background, and her position as an invisible worker to protect thousands of innocent victims from financial harm. She had proven that intelligence and integrity were more powerful than wealth and privilege, and she had shown that justice could come from the most unexpected sources. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change Maya's life forever and send shockwaves through the international financial community. The cleaning lady who spoke Hindi was about to bring down one of the most sophisticated fraud schemes in corporate history. Of whistleblowing. Even successful cases often left whistleblowers facing career difficulties, financial hardships, and ongoing security concerns. Companies like Meridian Financial had vast resources to spend on legal battles and private investigators, and they would not hesitate to use those resources against anyone who threatened their operations. Despite these warnings, Maya felt a growing sense of determination. She had uncovered evidence of crimes that had harmed thousands of innocent people, and she was possibly the only person in a position to bring the perpetrators to justice. Her unique combination of skills, access, and cultural knowledge made her an irreplaceable asset in the fight against corporate fraud. Maya also felt a deeper connection to the case beyond her professional obligations. The fraud scheme had exploited cultural stereotypes and language barriers to avoid detection, using the same prejudices that had made Maya invisible to commit massive financial crimes. Fighting this fraud was not just about protecting investors and employees, it was about challenging a system that used discrimination and prejudice as tools for criminal activity. As Maya prepared to take the next step in her transformation from cleaning lady to star witness, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her mother's sacrifices, her own educational struggles, and the countless nights spent studying while working full-time had all prepared her for this challenge. She was about to prove that intelligence, integrity, and courage were more powerful than wealth, status, and privilege. The battle ahead would test every skill Maya had developed and every principle she believed in. But she was ready to fight for justice, regardless of the personal cost. The girl who had been invisible was about to become the most important witness in one of the largest corporate fraud cases in American history. Maya decided she needed to gather more concrete evidence before taking any action. Her position as a cleaning employee gave her unique access to executive offices and confidential documents, but she would need to be extremely careful to avoid detection. She began developing a plan to systematically document the fraud scheme while maintaining her cover as an invisible service worker. Over the following weeks, Maya paid closer attention to the timing of her cleaning rounds. She learned the schedules and habits of the executives, identifying optimal times to gather information without raising suspicion. She began bringing a small digital camera disguised as a cleaning supply, allowing her to photograph documents when circumstances permitted. Maya's fluency in Hindi proved invaluable as she uncovered more evidence. Many of the most incriminating documents contained Hindi text that other employees couldn't understand. The executives apparently believed that using multiple languages would provide an additional layer of security against discovery. They had not anticipated that their cleaning lady would be fluent in both languages and trained in forensic accounting. The scale of the fraud began to emerge as Maya compiled her evidence. The scheme involved creating fictitious revenue through fake transactions with shell companies in India. Real funds were being diverted to offshore accounts while false documentation was submitted to auditors and regulatory agencies. The total amount of the fraud appeared to exceed $1 billion, making it one of the largest corporate fraud cases in recent history. Maya realized she was sitting on information that could bring down some of the most powerful people in the financial industry. The evidence she was gathering could lead to criminal charges, massive financial penalties, and prison sentences for those involved. However, she also knew that powerful people rarely went down without a fight, and that whistleblowers often paid a heavy price for their courage. As Maya continued her double life as a cleaning employee and amateur fraud investigator, she began to feel the weight of her discovery. She was carrying knowledge that could change the lives of thousands of people, both the victims of the fraud and those perpetrating it. The question that kept her awake at night was not whether to act on her knowledge, but how to do so safely and effectively. Maya's mother had always taught her to stand up for what was right, regardless of the personal cost. Kamala Patel had faced her own struggles as an immigrant woman working in service jobs, but she had never compromised her integrity or allowed others to take advantage of those who couldn't defend themselves. Maya knew her mother would expect her to find a way to expose the truth, even if it meant putting herself at risk. The story of Maya Patel was about to become much larger than anyone could have imagined. A young woman who had been rendered invisible by society's prejudices was about to prove that the most powerful weapon against corruption was not wealth or status, but knowledge, courage, and the determination to do what was right.